Have you ever felt a strange heaviness, a shadow that follows you, or battles you cannot explain? What if I told you these may be signs of a spiritual attack, and that today you will learn how to break them completely? Beloved, today I want you to lean in, because what I'm about to share may explain battles you've been fighting for months, or even years, with no clarity. Some of you have been praying, but the heaviness remains. Some of you are doing everything right, yet the resistance feels unnatural. Some of you feel watched, drained, or strangely bound to thoughts that are not your own. And if you've ever wondered, is someone spiritually manipulating me? Then you must stay with me until the end. Because I will not only reveal the 5 unmistakable signs of witchcraft, but also show you how to break it, cancel it, and rise above it starting today. Let's begin. Sign 1. Persistent, unexplainable oppression. When witchcraft is targeted at you, the first battlefield is the mind. A cloud of heaviness rests on you without reason. You wake up tired, you feel spiritually numb, your joy disappears like smoke. This is not ordinary discouragement, it is a forced atmosphere. But remember, the light within you is stronger than any darkness around you. Sign 2. Sudden, irrational fear or anxiety. A person under spiritual manipulation often experiences fear that has no cause. Your heart races, your thoughts tremble. You worry about things that were never problems before. These are arrows of intimidation designed to break your courage. But the moment you recognize it, its power begins to collapse. Sign 3. Relationships begin to break without explanation. Witchcraft thrives in isolation. Suddenly misunderstandings erupt. People turn cold. Loved ones pull away from you without reason. The enemy knows if he separates you, he can weaken you. But when you stand firm in faith, God restores and strengthens every connection meant for your destiny. Sign 4. Repeated nightmares or sleep paralysis. When spiritual forces attempt to invade a life, they often begin with the night. Terrifying dreams, shadows, voices, or waking up unable to move. These are not random events, they are attempts to plant fear. But the moment the name of the Lord fills your atmosphere, every chain breaks instantly. Sign 5. Your progress suddenly stops. You were moving forward. You had momentum. Doors were opening. But suddenly, everything stops. Opportunities vanish. Confusion rises. This sudden, repeated blockage is a classic sign of targeted spiritual interference. But the moment you lift your voice in faith, every barrier must dissolve. How to free yourself? Right now. Beloved, listen carefully. Witchcraft does not fall when you fear it. It falls when you stand in your authority. Speak life, speak truth. Speak the name that darkness cannot endure. Declare, every chain is broken. Every shadow is scattered. I am covered, protected, and victorious. Your freedom is not a process. Your freedom is now. Many people walk through life experiencing burdens they cannot explain, and often they mistake these burdens for mere misfortune, stress, or bad luck. Yet, there are times when these invisible forces are not random. They are deliberate spiritual attacks. When someone is under the influence of witchcraft, the effects are subtle at first, almost imperceptible. But gradually they become destructive, targeting every area of life, mind, emotions, relationships, and even physical health. The challenge is that these attacks often wear a disguise. They don't always manifest as obvious curses or dramatic misfortunes. Instead, they appear as ordinary struggles, self-doubt, anxiety, or repeated failures that feel inexplicable. Many who are targeted by witchcraft never realize it because the signs are not always loud. They whisper in the background of daily life, draining energy, hope, and spiritual clarity. Recognizing the subtle effects is the first step toward freedom. It is the step that empowers you to respond rather than remain a passive victim. One of the first arenas where these spiritual manipulations appear is in the mind. You may notice persistent thoughts that are dark, discouraging, or paralyzing. These are not your natural thoughts, yet they feel invasive, as if they have been planted in your consciousness. You might find yourself ruminating on fears or past failures in a way that disrupts your peace. The mind becomes a battlefield, and this is no ordinary stress. It is deliberate targeting designed to cloud your thinking, confuse your decisions, and steal the confidence that you were created to carry. You may also experience a kind of mental fog, where concentration becomes difficult, creativity is stifled, and clarity seems like a distant memory. Even the simplest tasks may feel overwhelming, as if invisible hands are pressing down on your mind, making every step forward feel heavy and laborious. Emotional manipulation is another effect that occurs when someone is under spiritual attack. Suddenly, you may find your emotions swinging unpredictably. You experience sadness, irritability, or anger for reasons you cannot explain. Joy feels distant, and the things that once brought fulfillment seem meaningless. Your heart feels heavy with an invisible weight, and a sense of loneliness or isolation creeps in, even when you are surrounded by people who care about you. This emotional heaviness is often the work of unseen forces seeking to destabilize your inner world. They aim to make you question yourself, doubt your worth, and lose hope. Many individuals who experience this do not even realize that the spiritual realm is at work. They assume it is simply life's natural difficulties, yet the persistence and unnatural quality of these emotions signal that something deeper is happening. Another clear indicator is the pattern of repeated failure or inexplicable delays in life. You may have noticed doors opening and then closing at the last moment. Opportunities that seemed certain suddenly vanish. Projects or goals that were progressing smoothly encounter unexpected setbacks. Relationships that should thrive are constantly tested by misunderstandings, conflicts, or emotional distance. This is not coincidence. Spiritual forces, when manipulated by witchcraft, are designed to halt your progress. They attempt to prevent you from moving into your destiny, to delay blessings, and to discourage you from pursuing the purpose for which you were created. These delays are often accompanied by a sense of confusion or despair, making you question your decisions and even your faith. The key is understanding that repeated obstruction is not always a reflection of your ability or effort. It is sometimes a spiritual tactic aimed at weakening your resolve. Physical symptoms can also manifest under spiritual attack, though they are often misdiagnosed or ignored. Fatigue, frequent illness, headaches, and unexplained aches are common among those affected. While doctors may provide explanations for some of these conditions, the persistence and pattern of such physical disturbances can sometimes point to a spiritual origin. The body is connected to the mind and spirit, and when unseen forces seek to oppress a person, they often begin with energy depletion and physical discomfort. This is a way to weaken the body while simultaneously affecting the mind and emotions. You may feel drained even after resting, as if a part of your vitality has been stolen. Sleep may be restless, with dreams that disturb your sense of peace, or even experiences of waking up unable to move. These subtle physical manifestations are often the first signs that spiritual interference is present, and recognizing them is crucial to taking action. Spiritual sensitivity is another area where subtle manipulation becomes apparent. You may feel a heaviness in your spirit, a sense that God's presence is distant, or a difficulty connecting to prayer or meditation. Things that used to ignite your faith feel distant or ineffective. This spiritual resistance is not a punishment from God. Rather, it is the work of forces attempting to create separation between you and divine protection. They want you to feel powerless, unworthy, or disconnected from the source of your true strength. Understanding that these sensations are not signs of spiritual inadequacy, but signs of an external attack is essential. It allows you to respond with authority and faith, reclaiming the ground that has been targeted Isolation is another subtle effect. Witchcraft often seeks to disrupt connections between people. Friends, family, and colleagues may start acting strangely, creating tension and misunderstanding. Loved ones may withdraw, and support systems that were once strong may feel distant or unreliable. This isolation is deliberate. The goal is to leave you vulnerable and alone in your struggles, making the attacks more effective. Recognizing this pattern can prevent you from internalizing the blame or feeling abandoned. It is not your fault. These are tactics used to weaken your life. Awareness of this effect allows you to reach out for help, reinforce connections, and strengthen spiritual and emotional defenses. One of the most dangerous aspects of subtle spiritual manipulation is how it attacks identity and self-worth. You may begin questioning your value, your purpose, or your place in the world. Negative self-talk becomes louder, and confidence diminishes. You might feel unworthy of success, love, or happiness. These thoughts are often implanted by unseen forces to prevent you from fulfilling your potential. The danger is not just in the negative thinking itself, but in the way it shapes decisions, relationships, and life direction. Recognizing that your sense of inadequacy is being influenced externally is a critical step. Once you see it clearly, you can actively reject these lies and reaffirm your true identity, which is rooted in divine purpose and strength. Finally, one of the most insidious effects is the normalization of struggle. Over time, those under attack may begin to accept these subtle forms of oppression as part of their everyday life. They may stop seeking change, praying with expectation, or taking steps to protect themselves spiritually. This acceptance is exactly what the forces behind witchcraft desire, as it perpetuates weakness and inaction. Recognizing that these struggles are not normal and that you are not powerless is the first step toward liberation. Awareness brings clarity, and clarity allows action. In summary, the subtle but destructive effects of spiritual manipulation can touch every aspect of life, mind, emotions, relationships, physical health, spiritual connection, and self-identity. Recognizing these signs requires attentiveness, spiritual discernment, and faith that you are meant to overcome them. They may be invisible to others, but they leave unmistakable patterns in your life. Persistent discouragement, unexplained delays, emotional heaviness, physical fatigue, isolation, and attacks on identity. Understanding and naming these effects is empowering because it allows you to take your place in authority, declare freedom, and reclaim the peace, joy, and strength that belong to you. Awareness is the first weapon in the battle, and once the veil is lifted, action becomes possible, and the life intended for you can begin to unfold. Every believer has been given authority beyond what the natural eye can see. This authority is not earned by human effort, wisdom, or cleverness. It is granted through faith, through alignment with the principles of the Spirit, and through a deep understanding that you are not powerless. Many people struggle under spiritual attacks because they fail to realize the magnitude of the authority that resides within them. The enemy depends on ignorance. When you do not know who you are in the Spirit, when you do not fully comprehend the authority you carry, it becomes easy for darkness to intimidate, confuse, and dominate. Yet the moment you recognize that authority, your perspective shifts, and the unseen forces that once held sway over your life begin to tremble. Spiritual authority begins with recognition. You must first understand that you are not a victim of circumstance, nor are you at the mercy of forces you cannot see. The Bible teaches that the faithful are seated with Christ in heavenly places, far above all dominion and power. This is not metaphorical, it is literal spiritual positioning. You operate from a place of authority even when circumstances appear to say otherwise. This authority is exercised not through confrontation with fists or weapons, but through faith, declaration, and alignment with divine principles. The first step, then, is understanding that you have been equipped with spiritual tools to counter oppression. Prayer is the primary mechanism through which authority is exercised. Yet not all prayer carries authority. The prayer that dismantles darkness is rooted in knowledge, faith, and certainty. When you pray with authority, you are not asking for permission. You are declaring truth, releasing what has been ordained, and commanding the dismantling of forces that oppose God's will for your life. This is why ignorance of spiritual authority is so dangerous. Many pray weakly, uncertainly, or hesitantly. And while God hears all prayers, authority requires understanding. You must know that the name you carry, the spirit within you, and the covenant relationship you possess empower you to act decisively against every invisible attack. Faith is the engine of authority. Faith is what turns the spiritual into reality. Without faith, authority exists in name only. It is dormant, powerless. But when faith awakens, mountains move, barriers dissolve, and strongholds crumble. Faith is not a vague hope or a passive desire. It is active confidence in the unseen, unwavering trust that your life is protected, guided, and positioned for victory. When you stand in faith, you no longer allow fear to dictate your responses, and you begin to operate from a place of supernatural confidence. Every declaration you make is backed by the unseen reality of spiritual truth, and this is what causes oppression to lose its grip. Understanding authority also involves knowing your boundaries and responsibilities. Spiritual authority is not a tool for pride, manipulation, or selfish gain. It is a responsibility to uphold truth, protect life, and walk in alignment with divine principles. The enemy attempts to deceive by presenting authority as something that can be used for personal gratification, fear, or control. True authority, however, is exercised in alignment with God's will through humility and obedience. When this alignment exists, your power is maximized because it is rooted in eternal principles, not temporary emotions or desires. Recognizing this distinction prevents misuse and ensures that the authority you wield is effective against spiritual attacks. Confession and declaration are essential practices in exercising spiritual authority. Words are not merely sounds, they are vehicles of power that can release or restrain spiritual influence. When you declare truth over your life, you are actively confronting the lies, deceptions, and manipulations that the enemy uses to enslave. This is why Scripture repeatedly emphasizes the power of the tongue. Life and death are in the power of words. When you consistently speak truth, declare freedom, and refuse to acknowledge defeat, you establish a spiritual boundary that darkness cannot cross. The enemy may attempt to intimidate, but words of authority, spoken in faith, act as a shield, separating you from attack and reinforcing your position in spiritual reality. Recognition of authority also requires discernment. Spiritual forces often operate subtly, and the ability to perceive what is happening in the unseen realm is critical. Discernment allows you to identify attacks before they fully manifest, recognize manipulations that others overlook, and respond appropriately with faith and declaration. Discernment is not about fear or paranoia. It is about awareness and alignment with spiritual truth. It is a skill developed through prayer, meditation, study, and attentiveness to the Spirit. Without discernment, authority is incomplete, for you cannot exercise power effectively against forces you cannot see. Another critical aspect of authority is the understanding of victory. Authority presupposes success. It assumes that you are positioned to overcome. This is why many believers struggle. They do not fully internalize that victory is their inheritance. Spiritual authority is not conditional upon circumstances, but upon alignment with truth. The enemy may attempt to create fear, confusion, or despair, but authority means you are empowered to reject every attempt to steal, kill, or destroy. It means you operate from the certainty that the ultimate outcome has already been secured. You do not fight for victory, you fight from victory. Spiritual authority is also relational. You do not walk in isolation when exercising this power. The authority of a believer is amplified through alignment with others who walk in faith, through submission to divine principles, and through connection to the Spirit that empowers all believers. Isolation weakens authority because spiritual attacks often target those who operate alone. Cooperation, accountability, and shared faith strengthen your position, reinforce your declarations, and create an environment where darkness cannot gain foothold. When exercised in community, authority is magnified, and spiritual attacks lose their effectiveness because the collective voice of faith and truth overpowers deception and manipulation. The manifestation of authority is practical. It is seen in the restoration of peace, clarity, and purpose. It is evident in the disruption of delays, the protection of life, and the dismantling of oppression. It is the invisible hand that restores what has been stolen and releases what has been held captive. Those who understand authority begin to see patterns shift in their lives. Relationships mend, opportunities open, health improves, and confidence returns. This manifestation is not a promise of an easy life, but a guarantee that the spiritual battles that once held sway are now subject to your declaration and faith. Authority transforms the invisible into tangible reality. Finally, authority is exercised through consistency and persistence. The enemy will attempt to test, distract, and wear down your faith. Subtle attacks, persistent doubt, or repeated obstacles are strategies used to erode understanding of authority. Yet those who persist, who continue to pray, declare, and stand in faith, experience breakthrough. Authority is cumulative. Each act of faith strengthens your position, builds resilience, and expands your capacity to overcome. The forces that once intimidated you are neutralized not by chance, but by consistent alignment with truth, recognition of your position, and unwavering confidence in the Spirit that resides within you. Freedom is not something that happens by accident, nor is it a state that is granted by the world. True freedom, lasting and unshakable, is the result of understanding, faith, and deliberate action in alignment with spiritual truth. Many people live their lives unaware that they have been bound by forces they cannot see, trapped in cycles of fear, doubt, confusion, and oppression. The first step toward liberation is recognizing that freedom is your inheritance. You were not created to live under persistent fear, to be manipulated by unseen forces, or to struggle in silence. Freedom is the design of your life, and the moment you decide to walk intentionally in it, the atmosphere around you begins to shift. The first step to walking in freedom is recognition and identification. You must clearly see the areas of your life that have been affected by oppression or manipulation. This requires honesty and discernment. It is not enough to sense that something is wrong, you must name it. Whether it is persistent fear, unexplained failures, emotional heaviness, or relational tension, acknowledging the presence of these challenges is crucial. Recognition brings clarity, and clarity allows action. Many remain trapped simply because they have not taken the time to examine their lives through the lens of spiritual reality. Once you identify the patterns of oppression, you can begin to confront them directly with the authority and power that you possess. The second step is declaration and verbal authority. Words are not merely expressions of thought. They are instruments of power in the spiritual realm. When you speak with intention, faith, and authority, you release forces that break chains and restore what has been stolen. It is essential to declare your freedom aloud. Speak life over your circumstances, over your mind, over your relationships, and over your body. Declare that every plan of oppression is nullified, that every hidden attack is exposed, and that you are protected by the highest authority. These declarations are not empty words, they are backed by spiritual truth and the power of faith. The more consistent and confident you are in your declarations, the more effective they become in dismantling spiritual interference. Prayer is another critical component of walking in freedom. Not all prayer produces breakthrough. Focused, intentional, and faith-filled prayer is what activates divine protection and intervention. When you pray with authority, you are not asking for permission. You are aligning with what has already been established and taking your place in victory. Prayer must be specific, direct, and consistent. It should include praise, acknowledgement of truth, and commands that address the areas of life under attack. Persistent prayer creates a spiritual barrier around your life, a hedge of protection that forces darkness to retreat. Those who neglect prayer may experience temporary relief, but sustained freedom requires an ongoing spiritual conversation that reinforces your position in authority. Another vital step is renunciation and breaking of covenants. Often, unseen forces gain access through agreements, associations, or unrecognized ties. These may be inherited, learned, or inadvertently entered into. Renunciation is the conscious act of rejecting these connections and breaking every chain that is not of divine origin. This requires both spiritual and emotional commitment. You must decisively say no to anything that would allow oppression to continue. Confessing these renunciations aloud strengthens their effect. The act of renouncing is more than a ritual. It is a declaration of independence, a refusal to remain under influence, and a reclaiming of authority over your life. Forgiveness and releasing of resentment is another step that cannot be overlooked. The enemy often uses bitterness, grudges, and unresolved anger as entry points for continued oppression. Holding on to resentment creates spiritual and emotional blockages that empower darkness. To walk in freedom, you must forgive those who have harmed you, release anger, and let go of grudges. This does not mean condoning wrongs or excusing harmful behavior, but it does mean removing the power those negative emotions have over you. Forgiveness opens the door for clarity, peace, and protection to manifest, and it ensures that no hidden ties can continue to manipulate your life. Faithful alignment with divine principles is also necessary. Freedom is maintained when life is lived according to spiritual truth. This includes cultivating integrity, pursuing righteousness, seeking wisdom, and practicing humility. Spiritual protection and liberation are not static. They are sustained through a consistent lifestyle that honors the principles of the Spirit. When you align with truth, you automatically close doors that oppression might use. The choices you make daily, what you think, say, and do, either strengthen your freedom or create vulnerability. Conscious alignment with divine principles creates a shield that deflects attacks and preserves clarity of mind and purpose. Community and support are essential in maintaining freedom. Isolation is a tactic used by oppressive forces to weaken individuals. By surrounding yourself with a faith-filled, supportive community, you reinforce protection and ensure that spiritual attacks are not faced alone. This may include mentors, spiritual leaders, friends, or family who understand the principles of authority and prayer. Their presence amplifies your declarations, strengthens your discernment, and offers accountability. Walking in freedom is not only an individual journey, it is relational, reinforced by the collective faith and wisdom of those aligned with truth. Meditation and focused reflection on spiritual truths also play a critical role. Mental clarity and spiritual awareness are strengthened when time is intentionally set aside to meditate on promises, truths, and victory. The mind must be trained to recognize truth over deception. Every negative thought, fear, or doubt must be confronted with affirmation of identity, authority, and divine protection. Meditation allows the believer to internalize these truths, creating a resilient inner life that cannot be shaken by external spiritual attacks. The more your mind is saturated with truth, the less room there is for confusion or manipulation to take hold. Walking in freedom also involves active protection and boundaries. While spiritual authority grants power, practical measures of awareness and caution reinforce it. You must be vigilant about influences, environments, and associations. Spiritual freedom is protected when the individual consciously avoids engagement with sources of corruption, negativity, or manipulation. This is not about fear or paranoia, but about wisdom and discernment. Freedom is sustained by conscious decisions to maintain environments and relationships that support clarity, peace, and growth. Healing and restoration are part of the process. Freedom is more than the absence of oppression. It is the presence of wholeness, peace, and joy. Many who have been under spiritual attack experience residual wounds, emotional, mental, or physical, that require intentional care. Engaging in restorative practices, whether spiritual, emotional, or practical, ensures that the liberated life is lived fully. Healing reinforces the authority that has been claimed, strengthens resilience, and restores the energy necessary to pursue purpose without hindrance. Finally, perseverance is essential. Walking in freedom is not a single event, but a daily commitment. The enemy may test persistence through subtle attacks, repeated challenges, or attempts to induce doubt. True freedom is maintained through consistent prayer, declaration, alignment with principles, and awareness. Each act of faith, each declaration of truth, each conscious step toward clarity reinforces the barrier against oppression. Freedom grows stronger with each deliberate action, and the individual becomes increasingly equipped to walk in victory, clarity, and divine protection throughout every aspect of life.